everyone, my name is Crystal Kirkland and I am doing my theory presentation on cognitive information processing theory. What is cognitive information processing theory? It is a multi-stage memory system to help process and understand information. Sensory memory is when a sensory stimulus is presented and with it a registration of that stimulus. For example, when I smell cigar smoke, I think of my grandfather, who used to smoke cigars. All memory will begin here and then either go into short-term or long-term memory storage. Short-term memory, or working memory as some call it, depends on the type of information in short-term memory storage, depends on the type of sensory input that it was collected with. Some might have a better ability to remember things if they read in comparison if they were verbally spoken to. A great example of this is when you meet someone for the first time and they tell you their name. Hi, my name's Crystal. If you're like me, I usually forget their name immediately after they say it or after they walk away. But if they were to have a name tag and I was able to read it, then I'm able to store that memory a little bit better with my visual sensory memory system. Long-term memory are the sensory memories that have transferred to long-term, to short-term, and then to long-term. So how this works is, hi, my name's Crystal. I'm from Clarkdale, Arizona. I grew up there, and then I moved to Colorado, and now I live in Wyoming. The way that someone might remember this is either how all of you are listening to this, you might remember it through auditory sensory memory. And some people might read about it when I upload my transcript of how I told everybody how this went. Either way, it depends on how your how it was sensorized and the sensory information was put into your brain and then where it goes from there. Short-term memory stores have 4 categories, like I mentioned before: auditory, verbal, linguistic, and visual. Auditory is similar to music or hearing, verbal being something someone said, linguistic, ability to remember different language, and then of course visual, being able to see it. All information eventually is completely lost from sensory and short-term usage, unless it is transferred and stored in long-term memory, which we'll talk about later. Some major milestones that this theory has gone through is it has evolved into the connectionist theory and then into the fractionation of memory theory, which we will talk about coming up in the next few slides. Atkinson and Shiffrin in 1968 were the creators of cognitive information processing theory. If I didn't mention that before, they really paved the road for this theory and other theories to come off it or evolve from it. My next group of theorists are Rummel and McKellen. They came up with the connectionist theory, also called the connectionist framework, and parallel distributed processing, or PDP. So first we're going to talk about connectionist model or theory. It is the theory that there is a network that builds bridges to connect and interact. For example, when you see or hear something that is funny, you laugh. The connectionist theory is that when the connection in your brain recognizes the emotion that you're creating happiness, then you have the response of laughter. Parallel distributed processing models are connectionist models that emphasize processing activity results from processing interactions in the brain. So, for example, if your brain is registering and interacting with a memory or sensory, then it is also increasing processing activity. So it's just like a computer. You enter information into it, and it has to process it, and then come up with a solution. Bedley in 2004 took Atkinson and Shiffin's theory and changed it slightly. They found problems that they didn't agree with of how the theory was presented, and we're going to touch on those now. Sensory is the same concept as the above theories. Going into working memory, it replaced short-term memory to emphasize the functional importance of cognitive processing. They divided this concept into two subsystems: phonological loop and visuospatial sketchpad. Phonological loop is assumed to comprise a store that holds memory traces for a couple of seconds, combined with the subvocal rehearsal process, according to Baddeley. For example, it was a memory loop that holds traces of memories that only last a few moments. The wind across your face on a windy day in Laramie. Or the subvocal rehearsal process would be correcting someone on how they say harbor. If they are from Boston or the New England area, they would say harbor in comparison to harbor. So when a child is learning how to speak in different areas, they hear, especially on, say, on the West Coast in Wyoming, Arizona, and those areas, we say harbor. But on the East Coast, they might say harbor. So learning and working with that memory. Visuospatial sketchpad is assumed to allow the temporary storage and manipulation of visual and spatial information. Therefore, is limited visual storage would be similar to remembering directions on how to get to a location that you drove to earlier that day or for the first time. Thinking to oneself, this looks familiar. That's that type of memory that you're working with there. The third component that Baddeley describes is central executive. It is assumed to provide an attentional control system for both working memory and its subgroups for other activities. They theorize that the activity of this system is how you're able to have a well-learned habits, learn new skills. For example, when you drive to the office instead of the grocery store on a Saturday like you had planned, that's because this system was unable to override that habit that you're so used to doing. I do it all the time. If I get off of work, I'm going to say, yeah, I want to go to the grocery store, and it's on autopilot, and I'll just drive home. It's that same, and that's that concept of the central executive. Episodic buffer. This is the processes whereby we can take advantage of prior knowledge to package information more efficiently and enhance storage and retrieval. So it's just a quicker way to access those memories. Long-term memory, they've split into two separate components, explicit and implicit. Explicit, facts and events that you're able to remember easily. For example, a fact for long-term for myself would be I am from Arizona. That is a long-term memory that I have had my whole life. I know that that is a fact. An event would be in 2011, I moved to Colorado. In 2015, I moved to Wyoming. Those are both explicit long-term memories. Implicit are skills and habits. So a unique skill would be driving a manual transmission vehicle. That is a long-term memory. Or, like a lot of people like to say, riding a bike. It's as easy as riding a bike. So the concept of you already have learned this, it is stored in your long-term memory, and now you have to tap into that. Other things that are also considered implicit are priming, the concept of showing someone a word or figure and then being able to remember it if showed again later. For example, a symbol, a logo, a Starbucks logo, a McDonald's M, things like that. Those are images that people are able to recognize at a later date and understand what they go to. Simple classical conditioning and non-associative learning. These are all examples of implicit long-term memory storage. And these are my references. I did a lot of research on this topic, and I really enjoy it a lot. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great week.